We are here today to remember a war so large as to dwarf all the other wars before it, so encompassing this war that it brought an entire globe into conflict, a war with old alliances, with old grudges. On a Sunday morning in Sarajevo at 10:45 a.m., 2 shots rang out, a single bullet of which, from a single gun, from a single individual, one Gavrilo Princip, a Yugoslavian nationalist, set in motion an extraordinary chain of events that would ultimately bring the entire world to its knees. His victim was none other than the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, one Archduke Franz Ferdinand. And his assassination on that fateful Sunday morning precipitated a series of diplomatic maneuverings between these two empires of Austria-Hungary and Serbia, which then led to an ultimatum from the late Archduke's kingdom and ultimately a declaration of war against the Serbians on the 28th of July, 1914. This then invoked international alliances which had been formed over the previous decades. Within weeks, nation after nation, empire after empire declared war upon one another until the conflict had spread around the world. Knowing that the Serbian Empire were allies of Russia, and also knowing that the Russians were mobilizing along its own borders, Germany declared war on the Russians in alliance with Austria-Hungary. This led to the French, who were allies with Russia. Germany declared war on France. Germany then, fearing a war on 2 fronts, decided the quicker victory could be gained against the French in the West. Germany had a plan, the Schlieffen Plan, which was not to invade France directly, but instead to invade neutral Belgium, to then pierce down into France and head directly to Paris. Germany invaded Belgium then, and it was this that brought one more nation into the war. Ours, this nation, this island. For years, Great Britain had been enjoying a time of isolation, of prosperity. This nation had built the strongest naval fleet in the world. This nation's empire spread throughout the world in commonwealth. With Germany's invasion of Belgium, it invoked our treaty with Belgium to protect her if ever she were at war. We declared our war upon Germany on August the 4th, 1914. We believed we could win and be home by Christmas. Home by Christmas was the call. Home by Christmas. And as this nation gathered its sons to send them as a British expeditionary force over to Belgium,
then too did this isle begin to work in supporting them. Volunteers, the number of which had rarely been seen before, came forward for the war effort. This very borough can lay claim to being the first to step forward, the very first. The Rains Park district raised a volunteer force within 2 days, numbering 250 individuals. The Rains Park Veteran Volunteer Force was formed. Merton and Morden followed suit in answering the call. The Merton Volunteers, 300 men under Major F.W. Thorpe, all gearing themselves towards aiding here from home and enlisting to do battle in Belgium. In total, 1,300 Merton and Morden men passed through these companies, the majority of whom went to the front line. Lord Derby's scheme itself raising well over 1,000 men. Lord Kitchener of Khartoum, Secretary of State for War, began his great surging endeavour for an entire volunteer army. The number of men passing through the Merton Council offices near 700. In total, his endeavour was answered in the largest volunteer army the world had ever witnessed. Training Corps, right off the bat. The famed Volunteer Corps of Wimbledon, 120 men within days of the declaration, 600 within 2 months. One of the most successful corps in the kingdom, formed by sportsmen, 7 days a week, weekends up on the common, executing drills for those wishing to do their part. The Red Cross and St John Ambulance, those stalwarts of virtue. Hospitals, both established and newly formed through volunteers. Nelson and Wimbledon, Ravensbury and Mitcham Hall, and Morden Hall Military Hospital. Nurses, those tireless servants working endlessly in preparation to heal those returning. Societies, countless. Agricultural Committee, Home Produce Society, Andrew Society, Choral Society, Ladies Committee, the Silver Thimbles, Pig and Livestock Society, Queen Mary's Needlework Guild, Boys Naval Brigade, and the Church Army, all living to offer their support, all ready to work in a mass movement to aid these soldiers. Let us not forget the very land and the part of the allotments and their tenants, growing the necessary sustenance for the effort ahead.
To Belgium, then. On the 9th of August, 5 days after Britain declared war, our British Expeditionary Force began embarking for France. The German and French armies numbered well over 1 million men each. The BEF numbered 80,000 soldiers, divided into 2 corps of entirely professional soldiers. Though we numbered far less than our counterparts, we were the best trained and most experienced of the European armies. Our training emphasized marksmanship. But let us not forget the inclusion of those who before, during, and after 1914 answered the call. The armies of India, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and Portugal. All answered the call to arms. On the 22nd of August, the British faced the enemy for the very first time at the Battle of Mons in southern Belgium.
The BEF reached Mons on the 21st of August, where first contact took place. Private John Parr becoming the first British soldier to be killed in the war. 6:30 a.m. on the 22nd of August marked the first substantial action as the 4th Dragoon Guards laid an ambush for a patrol of German lancers outside the village of Casteau to the northeast of Mons. When the Germans spotted the trap and fell back, a troop of the Dragoons, led by Captain Hornby, gave chase, followed by the rest of his squadron, all with drawn sabres. The retreating Germans led the British to a larger force of lancers, whom they promptly charged, and Captain Hornby became the first British soldier to kill an enemy in the Great War, fighting on horseback with sword against lance. After a further pursuit of a few miles, the Germans turned and fired upon the British cavalry, at which point the Dragoons dismounted and opened fire. Drummer Edward Thomas is reputed to have fired the first shot of the war for the British Army, hitting a German trooper.
On the 22nd of August, the French Fifth Army was already heavily engaged with the German 2nd and 3rd Armies at the Battle of Charleroi. We dug in along the canal. 80,000 men, the cavalry division and 2 corps, each with 2 infantry divisions. Our weapons, along with our trusted Lee Enfield rifles, were 24 Vickers machine guns, 54 18-pounder guns, 18 4.5-inch howitzers, and a heavy artillery battery of 4 60-pounder guns. The advancing Germans were commanded by Alexander von Kluck and had the greatest offensive power of all the German armies. Battle commenced.
Dawn of the 23rd of August saw German bombardment on the British lines. At 9 a.m., the first German infantry assault began. The British defending their lines exacted heavy casualties. So heavy was our rifle fire rate that the Germans believed themselves to be facing a battery of machine guns. This initial German attack was repelled with heavy losses.
The second offensive came, this one proving to be more successful. By the afternoon, however, it had become increasingly clear that the British position was untenable. At 3 p.m., the British 3rd Division received the order to retreat. A similar retreat was ordered to the British 5th Division. Still, the Germans came in force. News then arrived that the French 5th Army was retreating, leaving the British forces dangerously exposed. Vastly outnumbered, the British fought to inflict losses upon the enemy at a ratio of 3 to 1. Losses on both sides numbered at 1,600 for the British and some 3,000 to 5,000 for the Germans. Total losses numbered 516,000 for the Allies of France, Britain, and Belgium, and more than 300,000 for the German army. Belgium had been lost. The war would go on. "160,000 Belgian refugees arrived in Britain in the wake of the German invasion, some 800 of which found themselves right here in the heart of Merton. The local people rose to the occasion and began public means to attend to their new arrivals. Fundraising events were held to aid them, one of which was attended by members of the Belgian royal family, no less. In October 1914, Her Royal Highness, the Duchess of Vendôme, Princess of Belgium, and His Royal Highness, the Duke of Vendôme, along with their Royal Highnesses, the Princess Marie-Louise and the Princess Geneviève of Orleans, stepped out onto the grass of Wimbledon Common for what would be known as the Salutation of the Belgian Flag, an event to honour the resistance of the Belgians and raise funds for the 800 refugees billeted within the borough of Merton. Song would be the order of the day,
1,500 children, along with a full salutation choir under the direction of Dr. Coleman Young, gave choral ode and voice in honour of those who continue to fight for the defence of home here and the recapture of homeland there. Here now, we shall have ourselves sung in remembrance of the voices that sung on that October 1914 day by the Colliers Wood Chorus, who will sing a salute to the Belgian flag by Alfred Percival Graves, an ode sung just as it was then on that day in 1914.
To France, then. The Great Retreat culminated in the Allied forces finally coming together to form a sound defensive line along the River Marne on the very outskirts of Paris. A battle the Allies could ill afford to lose, for to do so would surely sound the death knell for the capital city, gaining Germany victory over France and relieving Germany of a war on two fronts. On approaching Paris, the German First and Second Armies began their swerve to the southeast in an attempt to envelop the retreating French armies. Aware of this, the Allies made plans to halt their continued withdrawal and attack the Germans along the German front, with the French Sixth Army numbering 150,000 men and the British Expeditionary Force numbering some 70,000.
The German army, however, detected this move and so wheeled themselves around, opening a 48-kilometre gap within their ranks. The Allies were quick to take hold of this scant advantage in the German lines and duly poured through with the French Fifth Army and dispatched troops of the BEF. The 8th of September saw the French launch another offensive, once more attacking the German Second, widening the gap further between the German First and Second Armies. By the 9th of September, the German First and Second Armies feared they would be encircled and destroyed, and there, for the first time in the war, came the call for a mass German retreat, and that they did, some 64 kilometres north to the Iron River, where they dug in with trenches that would ultimately last for 4 long years in what would become the Western Front.
Victory, then. Victory at the miracle of the Marne. In repelling the German attempts at taking Paris, the Allies had withstood a German victory that would have seen them able to pour the majority of their forces into the conflicts against their Russian foe. In defeat at the Marne, they would now be drawn into a long, costly conflict on 2 fronts. It was unequivocally to prove one of the single most important events of the entire Great War, though the cost was also great. Casualties at the Marne totaled 500,000 men, killed or wounded. The French alone, 250,000 men, 80,000 of which had lost their lives. British casualties, 13,000 men, 1,700 of which also losing their lives. Germany, 250,000 men killed or wounded. The cost of victory.
This is a poem by Wilfred Owen named as Anthem for the Doomed Youth. What passing bells for these who die as cattle? Only the monstrous anger of the guns. Only the stuttering rifles' rapid rattle can patter out their hasty orisons. No mockeries for them from prayers or bells, nor any voice of mourning save the choirs, the shrill, demented choirs of wailing shells, and bugles calling for them from sad shires. What candles may be held to speed them all, not in the hands of boys, but in their eyes, shall shine the holy glimmer of goodbyes. The pallor of girls' brows shall be their pall, their flowers the tenderness of silent minds, and each slow dusk a drawing down of blinds.
Subsequent actions between the Allies and their retreating German counterparts would result in the Battle of the Aisne, a stalemate, costing the British 13,541 killed or wounded, and the birth of trench warfare.
Then, into the race to the sea, an act of both armies attempting to flank and outflank one another, heading west and then sweeping north, manoeuvring and outmanoeuvring to envelop the northern flanks of one another into the Battle of Le Bessay in October 1914, which saw the German 6th Army taking Lille and the German 4th Army attacking the British northern flank. German reinforcements arrived after the British claimed Givenchy and Goël, the Germans reclaiming the initiative until the arrival of the Indian 3rd Lahore Division, which repelled further German attacks. Other battles north along the line, Armentières and Messinines, proved equally unclear as to the victor, both sides jostling for position until early November, when both forces began to pour their numbers into the larger battle taking place north, in Belgium.
In Flanders. The Ypres campaign marked the culmination of 1914 and the first year of the Great War. It witnessed the destruction of the British regular army, who, due to its small number, could no longer bear the heavy losses. The Old Contemptibles, so named and adopted as a badge of honor, diminished into the ranks of the British First and Second Armies, along with Lord Kitchener's volunteers. It would be a battle of atrocious casualties. Defeats at the First Battle of the Aisne and the miracle of the Marne convinced the German General Staff to insist on a swift resolution. Ypres was strategically vital. It was the last geographical object protecting the Allied ports at Calais and Boulogne-sur-Mer. The loss of these ports would have denied the shortest logistical supply route to Allied forces on the Western Front and would have had decisive strategic consequences.
For the German army, Ypres was equally vital. The collapse of its front would allow the Allied armies access to the relatively traversable terrain of Flanders. Beyond Ypres, the Germans had no significant defensive barrier to protect the huge rail network axis, vital to German mobility in Belgium and the entire northern flank of their front. Here then, in Flanders, after surging north, flanking and counterflanking one another, the war in the west would be decided.
In October 1914, the Germans, as a prelude to General Falkenhayn's Flanders offensive, captured Antwerp and forced its Belgian defenders back to Nieuport, near Ypres. Under the command of Field Marshal Sir John French, the British Expeditionary Force retreated to Ypres after Antwerp fell. The BEF held their line in the center while the French army manned their flanks to the south of the city. At the outset of the battle, the BEF and French army both retained the hope of launching an offensive of their own. They believed a coordinated attack would enable the Allies to recapture the industrial city of Lille, followed swiftly by Brussels. The Germans, however, had other ideas.
On the 20th of October, Falkenhayn's German Flanders offensive began when he ordered an advance to break through the Allied line and capture the ports of Dunkirk, Calais and Boulogne. He struck the Belgian defences on the Yser River between Dixmude and Nieuport. The already weakened Belgian army fought valiantly, but the German actions forced Belgium's King Albert to open the sluice that held back the sea. A week later, the Belgians flooded the land between their positions and the Germans along the 20-mile strip between Dixmude and Nieuport, creating a 2-mile-wide water barrier, forcing Falkenhayn to halt.
To the city of Ypres, then. Falkenhayn had at his disposal the newly assembled 4th German Army, made up of units from the Siege of Antwerp and 8 new divisions manned by underage recruits. Now the Germans could claim an even greater numerical advantage over the British. The BEF, however, could count on Indian troops, already en route as reinforcements. Though low in number, these Indian units would soon prove to be the most outstanding fighters. On the 31st of October, German cavalry drove a smaller British cavalry unit from its position on the Messines Ridge. The German forces engaged General Douglas Haig's 1st Corps further to the north, but a ferocious British counterattack repelled the Germans.
On the 11th of November, 2 premier German divisions attempted to break the British lines just north of the Menin Road in the Nuns Woods, only 4 miles from Ypres. Initially successful in creating a breakthrough, the Germans were slow to exploit their gains. German indecisiveness enabled the British to assemble a collection of soldiers, engineers, servants, orderlies, clerks and cooks, who stemmed the enemy advance and drove the German force back to their own lines.
On the 22nd of November, winter finally arrived, settling upon the fields of battle, forcing a reprieve from the hostilities. The battles fought had been unrelenting. To say one had been at first Ypres was enough to convey the horrors endured. No further words were necessary. The deciding battle of 1914 had ended.
The gunfire and bloodshed of 1914 had slowed to a cease within winter's grip. The realization on both fronts that a swift war and victory for either no longer the reality. The total number of losses during the 1914 war in the West may never truly be known. Accounts total the number of dead to at least 500,000 killed or died from wounds in 5 months. 500,000 sons. In this borough of Merton alone, we would know the loss of 9,000 over the course of the entire war.
The war would drag on, of course, for a further 3 years. And the death toll would rise as soldier after soldier and civilian after civilian gave their lives to a cause. Causes triggered by a single bullet, from a single gun, from a single man. So as 1914 ended, so must we. We conclude now with words from the Wimbledon-born poet, Robert Graves.
In the fields between La Bassée and Bethune, primrose and the first warm day of spring, red poppy floods of June, August and yellowing autumn, so to winter nights knee-deep in mud or snow, and you've been everything. Dear, you've been everything that I most lack in these soul-deadening trenches. Pictures, books, music, the quiet of an English wood, beautiful comrade looks, the narrow bouldered mountain track, the broad full-bosomed ocean green and black, and peace, and all that's good.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, as we close Merton's commemorative event of 2014, where we have been remembering the events of 1914 and how our people of Merton were affected at the time, I would ask you all to take a moment just to reflect on all that we have heard today and remember those who did so much to ensure that we are able to be here today to commemorate them. Thank you today for our narrator, Christopher Fairbank and Claire Walshe. I must say, Mr. Fairbank, I could be listening to you all day. Thank you. And to all the cast and brass band choir for making this a memorable moment in our borough's history. Thank you also to Atta for the leisure and culture team for the production of this event, and to all the staffs and volunteers, artists, production team, all the work that has gone into making this event has been wonderful. Thank you to the Colliers Wood Choir as well. They're a great bunch of people. Thank you to all those who have attended today. I encourage you now to remain and enjoy the music from the Regent Brass Band, who will continue to play and entertain you for much longer. Let the music begin, and thank you all very much for coming.